So let me start by introducing a guy we've just worked out I've known for 18 years. We first came into contact in around 2000 with a little thing called Battle Mail. I was working at British Telecom on a thing called Wireplay. The future was starting with dial-up modem, and we were trying to do online gaming. Can you imagine doing online gaming with dial-up modem anymore? Anyone did that? Am I just too old? It's like three of us.
We're the oldest in the room, I think.
We're so old. Anyway, but the point is that area, it's a lot of the same things that we deal with now, I think, still there. So, Paul, I mean, obviously I mentioned Battle Mail, you were Rockpool Games. Well, let's do a little bit of kind of a journey down the sort of historical route. So, what got you kind of started, and why? You know, anyone remember what Battle Mail was? Anyone not know what Battle Mail was, actually? Put your hand up if you don't know what Battle Mail was. So these people don't know.
No one knows what Battle Mail is.
Because, I mean, to me, this is the first social gaming, you know, in terms of computer gaming.
Yeah, sure.
And do you want to describe what Battle Mail was?
Yeah, certainly. So Battle Mail was 1 million years ago, as we said. It started in 1999, and the idea of Battle Mail was to create a free-to-play product that we distributed virally. So I guess that's why you're saying sort of, you know, an original social idea. And it was during that time, which again will make us feel really old, that .com was just exploding, and everyone was getting excited about the possibility that the internet had to distribute content. You know, and we were, you know, looking at the games industry at the time, thinking, well, the hard thing for indie developers, and I guess it's relevant today, is how you get your game out there. And we knew at that point, obviously, console was dominating, and it was a hard ecosystem to crack into. So there was something exciting about the notion of creating a platform that would allow content and gaming to be distributed for free, easily, and relatively friction-free over the internet. Admittedly, via, you know, small files over dial-up modems, but it worked. You know, in I think May 2000-ish, we had 1 million players, which, you know, and 1 million players back then was a big number. It's probably less big now, but
it's hard to get your head around just how big 1 million players was in 2000. It's like ridiculous. It was such a meme. I mean, you know, even the term meme wasn't being used in this way at that time. And you know, basically, I would pick whether I was going to hit or block, head height, mid height, low, and then you would get that. And then you would choose what your response was, and then it would tell you if you won or not, and then you would tell me. And that kind of interaction, that asynchronous play, sounds trivial now, but it was so important at the time.
Yeah, and I think it proved something to us as well, that it was quite thin, as you say. It wasn't a deep experience, but actually, we often described it as messaging up rather than gaming down. And that interaction was just more interesting than sending someone an email. And I think what that proved to us is that you know, there was a space out there in the world for that type of gaming, for casual, short session gaming that people would really engage with around what they were doing. You know, that idea that we're now familiar with, that you would sort of game around what you're doing rather than sort of sitting down in front of the TV and, you know, focusing on your game. That really proved to us that was possible. And there were a lot of people out there who would be gamers that would get involved in that.
Exactly. And then when you look at that sort of era, or like using the internet in that way, obviously the first thing you're going to do is go to a new platform and do mobile. What? You went, so just as the PC world and everyone was starting to find success with these kind of models you'd been doing, you're doing, I find you end up setting up Rockpool. And,
yes.
So how did that happen?
Well, we actually started on mobile at Battle Mail.
Did you?
So it was an interesting story. We got approached by, so we had, like so many .com businesses, an advertising model that, whilst we had millions of users and great critical acclaim, we were making no money. So, you know, we were desperate to try and stay alive.
So nothing's changed, really?
Nothing's changed. Yeah. But we were approached by Siemens Mobile, which, you know, again, a long, long time ago. Siemens were desperate to try and sort of put a dent on the mobile marketplace that was dominated by Nokia, and they had finally realised that it wasn't really about technology; it was about lifestyle. You know, Nokia had clip-on covers and ringtones and you know, games, and Siemens needed that. So Battle Mail became the very first fully animated multiplayer game, which was even preceding Java and Brew. So we actually were writing it to the firmware of the phone, which was, you know, pretty early days of this industry. But that made us, you know, Alex is sitting on the front row here, he was my business partner then and now, and that made us excited about the possibility that mobile had. You know, and we thought, wow, you know, what we've just seen happen on the internet with Battle Mail could happen on mobile devices. We were probably too early, but we all were. But we set up Rockpool to do that. So the idea of Rockpool was, you know, we were fortunate enough to sell Battle Mail, and the idea of Rockpool was to really start to work with big brand holders to try and bring their titles to mobile and to help them and to hold their hand really in at a time when the big mobile publishers just wanted to put a toe in the water. And you and I we knew each other then, and we remember that industry well. And the network operators were all powerful.
Yeah, because of course we had these wonderful people who were at network operators who were so pragmatic and so generous. I took 60% revenue share. Yeah,
and you controlled everything, and we would.
Yeah, literally, I literally
took our forelocks to you.
And hopefully, I was never actually like that. But I mean, there genuinely was a situation where this is a market that was making very little money in the scheme of things. I mean, compared to now, but there was so much control over who could go on when and how. I mean, I had a reason why I was being quite controlling, because I wanted to have a contextualized, editorialized service, and it turned out to make more money than any other operator, I'm glad to say. Per user. We didn't have that many users. But it was interesting kind of being in that world where it's so controlled. And actually, we still had people like the OEMs paying you to go onto their phone, which had like 2 pixels higher screen.
Absolutely, yeah, and we love those deals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we worked with a lot of the big brand holders to try and sort of establish that. So we did a lot of work with Sega, we did Sonic, Super Monkey Ball, Golden Axe, we did a lot of work with THQ, etc. So we worked with a lot of brands during that period and really sort of started to see the potential. But as you say, the market felt like it was a little bit broken. So the process of distribution was challenging. As you say, network operators were all powerful and frankly not the best.
Fragmentation was amazing.
Fragmentation was the biggest issue. So I think at Rockpool's peak, we were supporting somewhere in the region of 1,000 SKUs, which was just insane.
So anyone who's complaining about Android, remember that. And I think John Chasey, who was IMO, was telling me, with seeing Ian, and it reminds me, the Lara Croft game that they had on mobile, was it 3,000 builds? I think they had, at one point they had 3,000 builds they had to manage. So
it's a valuable lesson to not repeat.
Yes.
We were spending more money on porting the original builds to support the other SKUs than we were developing the game.
But the reason for bringing this up, and the reason for this kind of like journey down, history lane, it was really just to sort of show that a lot of the fundamental problems and arguments that we have, even today, still come down to those kind of root things, which is, where is the route to market? What is the pain threshold to do that, to get past that point? How do I access my customer? How do I find the content that suits the device that I'm building for? I mean, to my mind, all these are the same problems. I mean,
well, they are and they're not. I mean, in some respects, a lot of these problems have been solved. That's what makes the market today so exciting. Is that we don't have to, to handle all those SKUs. We do have a route to market that is much more achievable and scalable. And now mobile gaming is this huge industry. There was a time when we'd whisper what we did at dinner parties, but now it's it's this big deal. It's the biggest platform in games. It's 46% of the industry is mobile revenue. Yeah. So I think now we operate in a space where it is the biggest opportunity there is, and to bring product to market through the app stores is a friction-free process. I mean, I don't think there's any other digital ecosystem in the world where you've got over 2 billion consumers that you can literally deliver your software to, in a frictionless manner. So I mean, that is so exciting as an opportunity.
You don't
as a
have to go through the gatekeepers anymore.
But
we still have the gatekeepers.
Well, we have a massive discovery problem, which is kind of the same thing. And I think we often refer to it as at Playdemic as the aperture problem. You have 2 billion plus people over here, and 2 million apps over here trying to get to each other through this tiny aperture, which is the App Store. And we've talked a lot about discovery, and discovery is a problem on app stores because there's just so much content trying to get through this tiny e-commerce platform to all these people. So that's why obviously the huge growth in performance marketing has driven that distribution mechanic.
But before we go into that, I mean, I think it'd be interesting just to go into this whole idea of, because you got acquired, didn't you? And ended up,
Rockpool.
Yeah. And you ended up.
Ian bought us.
Yeah, exactly. You ended up in IDOS working on mobile content.
Yes.
And how did that change the way you thought? Because I think, again, this is another area I think we'll come back to, but did that have an effect on the way you thought about delivery of content and delivery of experience?
It did, and I think, to be honest, we were getting a little bit battle weary of that, what I guess I called mobile 1.0 at that point. Yeah. So this was a time when we were doing 1,000 SKUs, and as we said before, the network operators were all powerful, and it was looking like it was going to be a really hard space to make decent money and have decent success. So we'd started to look outside of mobile for similar casual opportunities. So if you recall, this was the period when DS started to explode, and there was this big casual revolution that was driven by Nintendo largely. We had the try before you buy PC market. So we were actually trying lots of the same driving force that made us want to make casual mass market content. We were trying out on different platforms, whether it be PC, whether it be DS, and that was getting pretty exciting. And when we were acquired by IDOS, we were acquired to head up their casual digital division, which was a really interesting challenge, and that we did for 2 years before the advent of Facebook. And Facebook was the next big platform that really excited us, because Facebook looked like the frictionless mass distribution sort of viral platform that Battlemail had tried to be 10 years earlier, and Facebook were really killing it. And we'd heard great stories from some people we knew at Playfish about how successful that could be, and Christian seemed to be building a really interesting business. So we left IDOS to set up Playdemic as a Facebook games company to really see if we could push that forward.
See, I'd forgotten about that bit, because obviously I remember when I have this very distinct memory of when Christian Segazari was still at Glue, I think, at the time, and he'd gone to Facebook's announcement they were going to do games. And it was this, I still remember it was a game forum, so it was basically this time of year. And he came out of the toilet, would you believe, and then was just enthusing about how social gaming was going to change the world. And it did for a while.
It did, and he was really early to market. Yeah. And none of us believed him for a while, and it took a while to really understand how big that opportunity was. And when we launched Playdemic, it really was experimental, because there was no Zynga, no one had sort of published numbers, no one had floated, no one had sort of done these big funding rounds. So we were just trying to find out whether this free-to-play model would work, and that was really the first time that we'd experimented with it. Even though Battlemail was free and lots of things we were doing, you could argue in that space, we'd never run a games as a service until 2010. So that was the first time we launched it, and I remember us putting the plans together, and typically we had the team that was going to make our first product, and then we were going to move off, and then we were going to make the next product, in that sort of old world style. And it was only when we started to launch the product and understand the power of running a live operation and learning all these wonderful 3-letter acronyms that we all throw around now, that this was a totally different way of doing business, and a much more exciting one to us, to actually have this ability to evolve the game in light of player behavior and respond to what people were doing, and reflect that in the content was hugely exciting.
And I think if you think about this whole journey, so again, one of the reasons why I like doing this history run is that it kind of, hopefully it reminds people, when you see the kind of success you guys are having now, this doesn't just magically appear and spontaneously. It's been this incredibly long and hard journey.
Yeah, I'd love to be an overnight success, but sadly we're not.
Yeah, it's taken you 20 years to be an overnight success. Yeah, which is a classic joke, isn't it? But I mean, these lessons, these continuous lessons, and what I find interesting is then when you've had to come back to mobile, what was the trigger to go back to mobile?
Well, it was really seeing, what we saw grow up on Facebook really should have happened on mobile first, and I think that was a really interesting experience for us to see, and I guess to a certain extent, it was really watching what Supercell did to see that pivot, is that we'd, obviously we all had iPhones, but we'd kind of had this slight downer on the whole mobile experience, and at that point, mobile was pretty much a premium business, and they weren't operating the free-to-play model as a dominant revenue stream as we were seeing on Facebook. So we saw this big scale opportunity on Facebook as a PC platform at the point that mobile transition was happening. And if you look at many players in the market that were very successful on Facebook, they did struggle to make that transition quickly. So Zynga probably being the best example of that. And so when we looked at that, we could see the emergence of the platform and the revenue stream that we wanted to be on starting to happen. And we made that pivot probably later than a lot of our peers, really, because we were doing so well on Facebook. So we were like, it's a bit like the Zynga problem. This is where the business is. Yeah. So why would we pivot? So we actually pivoted in 2013 back to mobile, which is ironic to come back to it late, even though we were in it at the very beginning. But the moment we did that was sort of the tidal wave of transition away from Facebook as a PC platform to Facebook as a mobile platform, and ultimately to the free-to-play business model that we know now, that obviously we'd seen be very successful in Southeast Asia, but was really starting to be dominant in the West. And obviously everyone knows now that free-to-play is the business model.
Yeah, well, you say that, but there is still kind of occasional murmurings around that.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, obviously the classic example being something like Monument Valley, which is obviously beautiful.
Yes.
Although I still say it's not a game. I know Dan and I have talked about this many times. I think it's brilliant, but I like it thinking of it as a puzzle. It's important to remind puzzles are good too. We shouldn't be elitist about it, but it's a puzzle. But the thing for me, though, is it's like magical experiences is what the crux of it is. It's being able to identify and isolate. In fact, actually, for me, this transition from Facebook to mobile was epitomised when Ilka stood up at GDC in 2011, I think it was, and he basically gave a fantastic story about how Gunshine had failed. And it was the most depressing talk in many ways, and yet it was the most enlightening experience because his then transition and then...
We wish we'd failed on Facebook too.
Oh, seriously. To that extent, it was amazing.
Absolutely.
But so the point is, we're now in this situation where we've got platforms, Apple and Android, able to get significant enormous numbers compared to any other market we've seen today, with the ability to have frictionless payment mechanisms. That's never been there. But then, how that then leads you to, Golf Clash and how you the Warner Brothers situation, all that kind of stuff. So how does that journey happen for you?
Sure. Well, I mean, it was, Playdemic made the transition initially taking one of our lead products on Facebook over to mobile. So we had a product called Village Life that was a 1 million DAU product on Facebook, and we took that over to mobile. So it was really that, it was a transition of a single product that took us back to space. And then, like many of our peers, we were looking to replicate that success. And I think, Ilka's talked about this a lot, but a lot of that process was really about trying to really find a product that would have that scale effect. I mean, going back to that Aperture problem, we all know now that there's little point releasing a product that you don't know has killer metrics, and so we spent a long time trying to find that next product and really trying to respond to what we were seeing in the marketplace, both in terms of our own data, what players were telling us, but also what we were seeing out there as being successful. So Golf Clash really was the sum total of us of analysing what we wanted to make, what players we thought players wanted to play, and delivering on something that we felt was the most optimised version that we could create of that. And the result has been hugely successful, which we're very pleased about.
But let's dissect it a little bit, because obviously, there's several components to that. And I hope it's useful for people to get this, because obviously we've got a golf mechanic. Nothing particularly new about golf mechanic. I mean, it's beautifully implemented. I'm not saying it, but
totally
I mean
agree.
that,
yes.
you've seen me play it, or I play it. But there's also this whole kind of social connection with another person as you play. There's also this ability to then break down that experience into like events and tournaments. There's also that experience where I'm effectively using the Clash Royale kind of model of almost infinitely growing options to enhance and personalise my experience. How does each of that, I mean, there's a whole layers and layers of experience going on there. How do you even get started thinking of an experience like that?
Well, I think obviously a lot of it's based on the experience in the studio. So we've done many of those things in other guises and other forms before, and we had a general idea of the type of game we wanted to make. We knew we wanted to make a short session game. We knew we wanted it to be portrait, very smartphone centric. We wanted it to be multiplayer. We wanted it to be real time multiplayer. We wanted it to be something that we felt really had a sense of presence, between you and your opponent. We'd seen 8-Ball Pool do that really well. That was something that we felt was a strong element of that game. So we wanted to try to condense lots of the things that we were playing out there in the market and that we thought were important into something that would really satisfy that. That's, I guess, going back to the original premise of mobile, that short session, snappy, engaging experience, something that would just grab you, but also that you could play happily for 3 minutes. And the joy, going back to some of the systems you mentioned, that I think the art of this type of game making is to have that 3-minute engaging experience, but also to have the systems and the design that will allow that to evolve into something much deeper over time. So you can access it at lots of levels. And I think Golf Clash works. The guys that have designed that in the studio have been able to create a product that operates on all those levels very successfully.
I mean, in particular for me, it's this kind of looking at it like wheels within wheels. And I think that's really kind of, I can play it and have a good time done. But when I play it and I unlock new things, I can feel reasons to carry on playing. But the real trick for me was when I entered the tournaments, and although I've done huge amounts of online social gaming for my entire career, I've become a bit kind of a recluse when it comes to social gaming, and I don't tend to dip in, mostly because I'm just not skilled enough. I'm too much of a generic player, not a skilled player. But actually, the tournaments just work, and they kind of get me playing, not just for that one session, but they'll keep me playing for 3 to 5 days. And that, I think, is incredibly interesting.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you were saying before. I mean, it's a bit like an onion skin. You want to be able to peel back the layers of the game and for it to keep delivering stuff to you. And then, we talk a lot about games that run as a service evolving for the player. So, games, we're trying to compete for people's time, in the long run. We want people to be playing, at this game for many, many years. And for us to deliver on that promise, the game has to evolve. It has to give you more. So that first short session experience that grabs you is the reason you come back. But the reason you stay is because it's delivering you a different experience. And tournaments are a great example of that. Tournaments aren't for everybody, but for those people that are highly engaged in the product, they offer another layer of depth, another layer of competition. It goes from 1v1 or in your league to 1v many. And I think that creates a new rule system, a new dynamic. It requires more of you. You have to play more, and that suits the highly engaged player. And it then evolves that gameplay experience. So suddenly it becomes about, I love Golf Clash because I love the tournaments. It becomes that part of the experience. And I think the best social or the best mobile games that offer a service do that really, really well. So, I think you can say this of Clash of Clans or, or Clash Royale or any of the great successful products out there, that the game you're playing a year later is not the game you started playing at the beginning.
And I think, really, that is the crux, isn't it? The point of the games as a service is that, the vast majority of the work happens after launch.
Undoubtedly.
And presumably that's still the same case for you guys.
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. And we love that. That's why we love games as a service, because, in some respects, the product we launched a year ago is unrecognizable from the product we have now. Obviously, the core essence of the product, remains, but that's the joy. And I think responding to player behavior is part of that. I remember Ian once saying that the days of the ivory tower designer are over, because, we can no longer just sit in a dark room, think creative thoughts. We have to respond to what players are telling us. And I think that is a great way to evolve your product, is to really listen to what's going on out there and then ensure that the game, delivers on that.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, the lesson for me in particular, things like Facebook did, was just show us how important data was.
Yes.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left. I can obviously and do spend as much time as I can with you, but anyone got any questions they want to add, or should I carry on just asking? Anyone want to chuck something at us? That's a resounding, it's too early in the morning. So on that note, let's talk a little bit. So obviously you were acquired by Warner.
Yes.
How did that happen, and what does that do for you?
Sure. So it was really a conversation that we've been having with Warner for a little while. We were talking to, obviously Warner have this incredible catalogue of IP. So as well as working on Golf Clash, we were also interested in looking at IP. Yeah. We could see the power of IP starting to impact on the App Store. So we started a conversation with Warner about some of their IP, and that conversation relatively rapidly turned into an acquisition conversation. And that for us was really about being able to play on a bigger field, really. It was getting access to the broad reach and the IP and the back catalogue of Warner, and also to be a little bit like our IDOS deal, to be part of a business that really wanted to do well in the space that we were excited about. So that was really the key driver behind it.
And a team that, Warner's been involved in mobile for a very long time.
Absolutely.
On and off.
Yeah.
But it must have been an interesting journey for them, because I suspect, I don't want you to talk for them, but it must be interesting working with a team that's got such a vast catalogue, such a vast array of different interests. Do you still manage to sort of retain a kind of core of you're still self-determining, so presumably you're getting to choose projects which will deliver real interest?
Yeah, very much so. And I think, Golf Clash obviously is now this massive success story, and that's we were all surprised by that. We all believed it's going to be successful, but none of us thought a casual golf game would be a top 10 grossing title. So I think we've all, both us and Warner, have been hugely impressed by that, excited by that, and I think really what we're looking at now is how we can evolve from there. To keep building on that product. We think this year Golf Clash will be so much bigger than it was in 2017, and then we're still talking about what we're going to be doing in years 3 and 4. So there's a lot of work to be done there. But really sort of taking those learnings and doing more of that with Golf Clash, with a more original IP, and with the Warner catalogue.
And I think you made an interesting point about Miniclip and 8-Ball Paul. It feels like there's a lot of similarities, a lot of kind of core identity about this kind of simple game that everybody understands, doing it exceptionally well in a really accessible way.
Yes.
That doesn't sound like a bad way to work.
No, it doesn't. And I think that's something that we all can sometimes lose a little bit. Again, I'll sort of bring Ian in here. Ian was our chairman throughout, before we acquired Warner Brothers. And one of the things that Ian used to say to me is, stop being so game developer-y. and what that and what that meant was, stop trying to overcomplicate things. Stop trying to do things that are really sort of, appealing to your own, sensibility as a game developer. Because, what the mass market wants is potentially something simpler, something much more pure. And I think that's really what we've delivered in Golf Clash, is a very simple, compelling experience.
And so what's the one thing you would let these guys think about? What should they take away from this?
I think the one thing I would say is that is don't give up on the belief that you can get to the top of the charts. I think a lot of people have talked about the fact that the mobile industry is over, it's done. Supercell and King have won. You might as well pack up and go home. And I think we're evidence that isn't true. We were a small developer in the UK, in the wrong part of the UK, and we were able to achieve that success. In fact, during Thanksgiving, we were the number 2 grossing game on the US App Store. So it's possible. It's hard, and that you'd need a decent amount of luck, but it is possible. Don't give up on that idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.